And we are live on YouTube, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Amanda. So for everyone, welcome to House Transportation Committee. Remember the decorum we follow. We speak through the chair when presenting bills and answering questions and that sort of thing. Remember to be respectful of each other and all the people participating. So we have two bills to consider today, House Bill 131, Transportation Department Contract Immunity Repeal, and House Bill number 135, Hanco Leadership Highway Designation. So with that, we'll start with House Bill 31. I see Representative Larson is here to present his bill. Representative, please join us. And you may sit at any chair you wish.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to take a roll?
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Diane, would you take roll, please? I'm kind of ahead of myself here a little bit.
That's okay. Representative Baker,
Here.
Representative Brown,
Here.
Representative Burt,
Here.
Representative Henderson,
Here.
Representative McGuire,
Here.
Representative Obermuller,
Here.
Representative O'Hearn,
Here.
Representative Stivar,
Present.
and Chairman Burkhart.
Here. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, I think we can proceed.
All righty.
Representative Larson, please present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to present House Bill number 131. I've brought this bill quite a few years now. I don't get too far, so I'm gonna try again. I think it's very important to have this discussion and see if we can get it out to the floor, at least to discuss it there. I'm gonna have just a small introduction here before I go through the bill, just to give you kind of an idea of what's going on. In the statute that I'm changing, which is refers to or trying to amending YDOT and the Department of Transportation and the Commission. This statute specifically requiring the Transportation Commission to honor its contracts is still on the books. And that statute was written in 1919, so it's been there a long time. The Wyoming Supreme Court said in the emulsified asphalt case that went to trial when there was a contractor that had issues with a contract they were dealing with, that the Governmental Claims Act repealed by implication the statute requiring the Transportation Commission to honor its contracts. And that was in 1998. That case is the first time that the Transportation Commission asserted immunity and said the Government Claims Act made it immune from honoring its contracts. And that Governmental Claims Act was written in 1980. So it kind of gives you some dates there. Again, the statute requiring the Transportation Commission is still on the books to honor it, that says it should honor its contracts. I am only asking that the legislature to formally acknowledge that the statute is still valid and confirming the Transportation Commission is not immune from honoring its contracts, even though the Supreme Court said that it was repealed by implication in the case against the emulsified asphalt. I am asking if it is the legislature's desire to keep a statute in place, which was on the books for decades before they got repealed. And the crux of this issue is actually legislated. The crux is that the Wyoming Supreme Court actually legislated by repealing the statute. I believe that the legislature has never repealed it, and this is basic separation of power issue whereby the legislature is asserting its role over the court to say that we didn't say that that has been repealed by implication. So now I'll go through.
Representative,
Yes.
if you would please elaborate on the emulsified asphalt case. What was the case? What was the final outcome? That sort of thing for the committee, please.
Yes, I will. like I said, that was in 1998. What happened was emulsified asphalt took the Transportation Commission to court. They had an issue inside their contract where the YDOT had actually miscalculated how many cubic yards of some material that they needed. And so during the contract, during fulfilling that contract for many years, they had agreed that they'll come to a conclusion that they both could agree that they'd be paid a certain amount. Well, it never did, emulsified asphalt didn't agree with what YDOT was going to pay them. So they went to court. The first court said that due to governmental immunity, that they'd throw it out. And so they threw it out, but then they appealed and went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, I can kind of read it to you, it might be the best. The Wyoming Governmental Claims Act governs sovereign immunity in this state, and where a statutory provision in the Commission's enabling statute conflicts with it, the latter is repealed by implication, is what the court said. Under that act, the Commission was authorized to insert an immunity provision in the contract with emulsified. However, that provision in the contract, in context of emulsified contract, is ambiguous and has it to be construed against the Commission. So emulsified is entitled to sue the Commission in district court on its complaint, and we reverse the order dismissing the complaint. But that was kind of just in their contract. They had some issues that, like it said, they were ambiguous. But I think the main point is that if you write a contract with a person, you ought to be able to go to court and discuss if you have an issue on that contract. And so I really hope we can get to that point and bring that back up.
Representative O'Hearn?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, was there a pre-bid inspection in the contract? Because many contracts I've written said you need to be at the pre-bid inspection and your figures have to match, or you have to figure out how much emulsified asphalt you're going to need for this job. Because if the state engineer said we're going to need 20 or 200 cubic yards and it comes up to be 280 yards, it should have been the contractors, the construction company that verified that.
Representative?
Well, I don't know. You're getting into the weeds on me. I'm not real sure. I'm not sure if there was a pre-bid or not.
Okay.
You may have a better idea of that than I would. In 1998, where they were doing them back then. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, it's a standard practice now. I don't know about 1998.
Representative,
Oh, excuse me.
you have another question,
No follow-up.
right? Anyone else? Representative, please proceed with your bill.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So now we'll go to the bill. There's just a couple places where we have some amendments. The first one is statute 139-104, which is actually the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act portion. In there, it is very confusing, I think, in visiting with LSO, specifically on line 6. Obviously above there in line 1 through 5, they're talking about liability for tort. But then on line 6, it says any immunity in actions based on a contract entered into by a governmental entity is waived except to the extent provided by the contract if the contract was within the powers granted to the entity and was properly executed and except as provided in 139-120B. And we thought that was rather confusing, saying it's waived unless it's in a contract. So we inserted on line 4 an amendment that states unless the governmental entity is specifically prohibited by law from asserting the immunity under this subsection. And we would refer to that subsection in the new statute 24-2101. So we thought we needed to put that in there. I didn't do that in prior bills that I had brought. And then we go to the section 24-101, which deals with our WYDOT, Wyoming Department of Transportation, and the commission. And I think you've all probably read it, but I think I'll read it again anyway. It says on, starting on line 19E, the commission shall maintain offices in the state capitol. The commission is empowered to sue in the name of the Transportation Commission of Wyoming and may be sued by that name in the courts of this state in no other jurisdiction upon any contract executed by it. So we still have that in statute. And then we put in the amendment, neither the commission nor the department shall assert immunity under section 139-104A, which is the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act, in defense of any action based on a contract entered into by the commission or the department and brought under the Wyoming Governmental Claims Act, regardless of whether the contract contains an immunity provision. And that's all we're putting in there, and that's pretty much the bill.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Larson? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I was just curious if have there been more recent cases than the emulsified where this has been an issue, or who's can you fill in who's kind of driving this process?
I can, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Please.
And Representative Obermuller. I have a lawyer up in Powell that has had probably 3 issues with contracts with WYDOT. Well, his contractors have. And so they go through the process of the regulations and rules that they have, procedures, so you can tell the WYDOT that you have a complaint. And those are very arduous and hard to get through. They're working on those. After last year's bill, we got WYDOT to get with contractors and try to clarify those a little bit more and make them so they're more simple and not so hard on the contractor to do. Obviously, we want to make sure that we don't bring in a lot of lawsuits, but again, I think if we have an issue inside a contract, they ought to be able to discuss it. But that is kind of what's going on. I think WYDOT, I would guess they're going to be on here in a bit, and they can explain the numbers over the years. But it gets down to the very end when the contractor and WYDOT are trying to figure out what they can do inside their procedures. It gets to almost the end that the contractor gives up, and then they kind of wave their white flag and say, "You by the way, you can fight us all you want. We're not going to court because we have immunity."
Okay. Representative Obermuller.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any of these contracts have like mandatory arbitration or any of those kind of provisions? Do you know how they do that?
Not
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. Representative Obermuller, I do not know that. I would guess we'll have hopefully they'll let us know. I don't think they do.
Mr. Chairman, I don't
Follow up,
see any
Representative?
people from the commissioner of the department to testify about that. So,
Representative, we're also live streaming, and I think they'll participate by video.
oh, thank you.
Representative Brown, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, so I've got a couple of questions here, and I'm going to start off with the first one. I vaguely remember this being brought up, and you said you brought it forward a few times. So I'm just kind of curious what the discussion has been and why it's failed in the past.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, I think the last time we had brought it up, it was like at 10 o'clock at night, and the Transportation Committee had just had enough of everything. Representative McGuire I think was there, and had mentioned that if we ever have these issues, he would like to hear about them also. I don't know. I didn't contact him on, any new complaints, but
Representative?
Representative Larson, what kind of money are we talking about in these contracts? Is this, $5,000-$10,000? Is this hundreds of thousands of dollars? What I'm concerned about with this, and the reason I asked this question to give a little bit more clarity to potentially your answer here is we talk about the amount of time and effort investigated into these types of claims. Are these large claims that are going to be large sums of money paid out by the state and potentially paid to the contractor? Or are we talking about staff time and attorney's time and all that kind of stuff that's negligible at the end of the day?
Representative Larson?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Brown, I think it for the contractor that has performing for the job, what I've heard, they're in the 30 to 50,000. But for the recent ones, and I threw those numbers out. I hope they're pretty close. But you get into that amount, even for a small contractor, it could be a big deal. Now, on emulsified asphalt, I believe that was pretty big, but I'd have to find the numbers. I probably better not even say a number, but I think it was pretty major.
Representative Brown?
And then, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. This truthfully seems, okay, we've got Transportation Department on the title. This certainly feels more in the bailiwick of the Judiciary Committee when we're talking about liability and stuff like that. So can you please make me completely understand that we're talking about if a contractor does work for the state potentially as well, let's say they take out a chunk of I-25 and that chunk of I-25 magically has a defect. Somebody crashes their car because of the defect. They then sue the state. The state is not held liable for that. And so the state can then turn around and pass that liability onto the contractor. Is that right? Is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about strictly money? Because the way I look at the bill, it looks like this is a liability waiver and allowing people to sue the state for contractors' negligence.
Representative Larson?
I sure wish I had, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I sure wish I had my lawyer on the phone, and he was going to try to get on, so we'll hope he's there. But I do not believe that'll bring in anything like that. The contractor would need to have his own liability insurance if he's done something that he had a piece of equipment in the wrong place at the dark hours of night and didn't have the markers up or whatever he needed. The state isn't going to be drug into that.
And last one,
Representative Brown?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So curious on this, have you talked with the state risk manager on this? The state risk manager handles literally all these types of claims with the Governmental Immunity Act. Is there been any discussion with the Department of Administration and Information other than a fiscal impact as to how this would ultimately affect the state in contracts going forward?
Representative Larson?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, I have not talked to them. I am not sure if YDOT goes through that procedure. So I guess that's a question we'd need to ask YDOT. In earlier discussions over the past years, obviously the Attorney General, and they may be on too, has had concerns and worries that this is going to bring up a bunch of new cases, but I really don't think it is going to. But their opinion and mine's different, and I like I said before, I wish my lawyer that has been pushing this is on the phone and will kind of clarify what he hears out there, because I think.
Other questions for Representative Larson? Other question? Okay. Then Representative, I do have one, and it relates to what Representative Brown asked. The bill title is Transportation Department Contract Immunity. And it appears that, the bill does that. It targets the Transportation Commission. Is there a larger issue with all state contracts? Because I know a number of the state agencies have contracts with companies to do work, whether it's heating, air conditioning, fencing, additions to buildings, that sort of thing. And that should it be expanded to include them, or are we just gonna stick with transportation at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I thank you for the question. I would say that all agencies probably are putting this into their contracts, and I don't think it's right. And there are other people co-sponsoring that would probably say the same.
Okay.
And so I hope we don't go that far on this bill. I would like to just work on this one, and then in the future, let's talk about the others. I mean, I just really have a big problem when you have two entities, could be people or a contractor with an agency, and you sign a contract, you should be able to go to court if you can't resolve it through the procedures that they have provided.
Thank you. Any other questions for the representative? Okay. So Representative, you hang with us as we proceed with your bill. With that, I'll open it for public comment. I think we have on video YDOT, and I will open it up to those. If Amanda, you would admit all the YDOT people, please. And I see Mr. Winnie here. Are you going to wish to testify on the bill, Mr. Winnie, or are you just watching? I'm just curious.
Actually here for your next bill.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Education. I spent some 6 years in the Pentagon and saw sort of this process at the federal level, but I don't know that I have anything good to add.
Okay. Thank you. I asked because you're the only one here. Okay. With that, we have, who do we have from YDOT? I apologize, it is hard to see everyone due to these plexiglass screens and they distort who is up there. I see Mr. Rossetti for one, and the rest I can't tell from here. Amanda, who do we have?
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Rossetti, we have Mr. Tom DeHoff, and Mr. Gillette from YDOT.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to go first?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having us here today to discuss House Bill 131. My name's Taylor Rossetti, and I'm the Support Services Administrator for YDOT. With me today, I do have Chief Engineer Mark Gillette and Assistant Chief Engineer for Operations Tom DeHoff. I believe they can answer a lot of the process questions that may come up regarding the actual process that's in the contract. The department is engaged in 3 committees over the lunch hour, and the director was called into another committee and does send his regards, sir.
Thank you. Oh, and it's good to see both Mr. Gillette and Mr. DeHoff again.
Okay, great.
Proceed,
Wonderful.
Mr. Rossetti, please.
Mr. Chairman, we're coming at this really not as lawyers, but as longtime public servants that are really required to do an awful lot of contracting in order to accomplish our duties. Contracting is not unique for YDOT, as has been pointed out by the committee, and the concept of sovereign immunity is important to all public officials in Wyoming. There is a perception that the state has deep pockets, and removing this protection only serves to potentially increase costs to the Wyoming taxpayers. From our department perspective, we're curious as to what problem we're trying to fix with House Bill 131. I believe the issue at hand in the 98 ruling was that there was ambiguity in the contract, in that the contract did not assert sovereign immunity, which caused for the ambiguity. Since that time, our contracts do indicate that we maintain sovereign immunity in the process of our contracting. And we do outline a dispute resolution process in the contracts. And if followed in the scope of the contract, we do waive a good portion of our immunity and in fact can be sued. In the past 18 years, we've let nearly 1,800 contracts with about 4 of those actually resulting in a lawsuit. Our records actually indicate that of those 4 cases that were brought before us, Mr. Chairman, in only one of those instances did a judge rely on sovereign immunity as a reason to dismiss the case. It's important to note in that case, there were multiple other reasons for which that case was dismissed, including the person filing the case didn't have standing, it was filed in the wrong court, it was filed in the wrong county, and it was filed outside the deadlines that were stipulated within the contract. A couple of other quick observations from the department, Mr. Chairman. As Representative Larson mentioned, there was a concern brought to our attention last year. We did try to put together a working group in order to work through some of these issues to ameliorate some of those fears. We did agree to put that group together. That group did consist of members of the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming, as well as some of the constituents from the legislators' area. We sat down and worked through some of those issues. This led to modifications of the spec book, which is really kind of the book that governs the contracting process for WYDOT, and by reference is incorporated into every contract that we let. Our goal at WYDOT is to always be a team player, balancing the needs of the agency, the public, and the contractors doing the work for us. It is relevant to note, again, that we do waive large portions of sovereign immunity in that contract as long as that process is followed. If that process is followed and the final resolution is not to the agreement of the contractor, they do have 30 days after the chief engineer's final decision to file a lawsuit. The only time that we would assert sovereign immunity basically is a blanket. There's five issues that we would always assert sovereign immunity on. One of them is prejudgment interest on the amount of the dispute. The other is exemplary or punitive damages, attorney fees, consultant fees, or other costs of litigation, damages exceeding the actual costs as supported by the documentation, and consequential damages, which are things that are not really in items 1, 2, or 3, but would exceed over 10% of the calculated costs in item 4. Those 5 items are unpredictable. And if we were to allow lawsuits to proceed along those lines, there's really no way for the state to predict what our financial exposure would be. Predictability is increasingly important in these tight fiscal times. Knowing that a $50 million contract let by the department and awarded by the commission will cost us $50 million rather than $60 million is a critical component to keeping our infrastructure projects moving forward. In an extreme example, we may be liable for $1 million in plaintiff attorney fees or consultant costs in order to litigate a $2 million contract. Again, that is an extreme example, sir, but that's really what we're faced with when we're evaluating the potential impact of this bill. And again, I guess in closing for me, Mr. Chairman, I would mention again that contractors are allowed to assert their legal rights under the terms of the contract. That does include a dispute resolution process. And as part of that, we do actually waive certain parts of sovereign immunity. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think we'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Rossetti or Mr. Dehoff, Mr. Gillette? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with the question about if process is followed. Who determines if process is followed for the ability to sue?
Mr. Rossetti? Or I guess any of your cohorts there?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the chief or assistant chief would actually be able to walk you guys through that process if you'd like.
Mr. Dehoff, Mr. Gillette, either.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Gillette, Chief Engineer with WYDOT. The process is outlined in our spec book, and it's under section 105.15.1. And it's really a 3-part process. If there's a dispute with one of our contracts, the contractor notifies the resident engineer. And the resident engineer, if he makes a determination and the contractor does not agree, he can appeal that to the district engineer. The district engineer holds a hearing and rules on what he hears. And if the contractor still is in disagreement with that, they can appeal it to the chief engineer. The chief engineer holds a hearing, and upon the information and documentation presented, the chief engineer makes a decision. If the contractor still does not agree with what the chief engineer has come to, then they do have the ability to enter into a lawsuit with the Commission of the Department of Transportation.
Thank you. Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any alternative to suing, such as arbitration, or are there any options for the contractor other than suing at that point?
Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, I do believe that they could, I think there is another way they can do that. I can't come up with the terminology right now, but I do believe there is another way that they can express their concerns.
Okay. Any other questions for the department? Other questions? Okay. Amanda, I apologize. We got a little bit out of order. Are there any representatives, senators who are here to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, that's everyone in the waiting room that has their hand raised. There's no senators or representatives in the waiting room.
All right, thank you. So anyone else wish to speak on the bill? And I'm assuming not. So with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Representative Brown.
I normally would move the bill to have discussion, but Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say this a little bit out of order, but again, I'm concerned with the bailiwick of the Transportation Committee having the understanding and the difference here. The one thing that concerns me is something I spoke with Vice Chairman on. We're talking about two different forms of information here, and we're talking about tort litigation versus contractual litigation. And so I'm wondering if it might be in our interest to re-refer this to the Judiciary Committee. It's just kind of it seems like we're talking way more about the lawful side of things and contractual issues much further in the bailiwick of the Judiciary Committee than it is the Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Representative. So, but I think no,
I can't.
no, he cannot motion that. So to do that, we need to bring it out of the committee and can re-refer it.
Yeah.
Just for the new members. That's the process. And that, so committee, any action on the bill? Okay, moved by Baker.
I'll second.
Seconded by Brown. Okay, any discussion on the bill? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, this is it's a very interesting bill, the way that it's been written. Maybe not necessarily the way that I would write it, but anyway. When you look at governmental immunity in the big picture, and if you go to page number 2 of this bill, subparagraph A, on the third line, it talks about immunity and liability for any tort. Now, tort is very different than not paying a contract. A tort is either an intentional or consequential act that ends up in harming somebody. So if I were to go and take a swing at somebody, miss them, but hit the person behind them, I would be guilty of a tort against the person who got hit. That's a tort. What the person who drafted this bill did is they went into the broad-based governmental immunity section for the state of Wyoming, and they have taken out the governmental immunity for all torts, which, oh my goodness, talk about opening the door. I mean, that would be a major change in the way that the state of Wyoming and our self-insurance works and how things would go. So that is a big change. When you look at the Cundy, or excuse me, not Cundy, but the emulsified asphalt case, which is, yes, it's a 1998 case. It was much more complicated than that. There were a lot of issues. There were a lot of issues with quality and everything. The initial case was dismissed. It went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, yes, there are issues that can be litigated, and it was sent back down to be litigated. But there was nothing in there that said that the state of Wyoming was not paying its rightful, not paying on the contract. And I have heard before this anecdotal evidence that the state is not paying its contracts, but I have yet to see a rightful contract that was entered into by the Department of Transportation where they said, you know what, we're only going to pay half or a third or whatever. I mean, bring me the hard evidence and I will say, yes, bad on YDOT and something needs to be changed, but I just don't see it. We just heard testimony that there are several procedures in place. Yes, they do have in their contract, they have governmental immunity within their contract. Every department that issues contracts from the state of Wyoming within the last 20 years has had a governmental immunity provision in there. And then you waive certain parts of it in order to enter into that contract. And whoever's contracting, whether it be a carpenter or a tile layer for a new building or a company that's laying asphalt, there are specifications in the contract and there are inspections. And if the inspection is not satisfactory, then there is an opportunity to go and to have a informal hearing. And if that doesn't work, you can go to the administrative hearing officer. And if that doesn't work, then you have 30 days and you can go to district court. And it's the same for, I think, just about every department in the state of Wyoming. I just don't see why, why we would go down this road unless somebody can bring us here's the case and here's the department not paying. And here they, very clearly, here's the testimony. They drug it out until the plaintiff got tired and quit. And I just don't hear that. So I would encourage us, barring some kind of concrete evidence, my vote would be not in favor of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to piggyback off of the comments from the good representative from Casper. My career was around this industry and the contractors that worked in this industry. And I can tell you that the ones that knew how to document won these cases. The ones that knew how to document. The ones that didn't know how to document are the ones that had problems with YDOT in this area. So anyway, I'm voting the way Representative from Casper. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the bill? Okay. Comments on the bill? Representative Larson, please, if you have a comment.
Had it. Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I got the green light finally. I guess I'm hearing all these comments, but it does worry me. The procedures, if you have your documents in order, might be good, might not be good. I have heard that the procedures are really tough to get through. They want you to, the timelines when they're requiring these questions and stuff, or you're right in the middle of the contract in your work orders, and you're having an issue on the very first part of it, and then all of a sudden they're wanting you to go battle, even though you're still right. You still have 3/4 of the project to go. The timing is really tough to get through. I do know that. And it doesn't seem like YDOT is very favorable to helping that out. I do have worries that obviously, I don't know how to say this, but it acts like to me that the big government is not, is overruling. And I really think we ought to keep it going. Let's get this out on the floor. I'll get you some some actual facts on this. Like I said, I never can get my lawyer to be online. He can tell you of 3 that he's been through. And he could tell you all the timings that are the big issue. But I hope you consider getting this out on the floor.
Thank you, Representative. Committee? Question having been called. Diana, would you take roll, please?
Representative Baker. Representative Brown,
No.
Representative Burt,
Aye.
Representative Henderson,
No.
Representative McGuire,
No.
Representative Obermuller,
No.
Representative O'Hearn,
No.
Representative Stivar,
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart.
No. Thank you, Representative, very much. And for the committee to explain something, and there was a consideration of re-referring this bill. To re-refer the bill, it would have had to pass out of committee, then could be referred. Having voted, the majority having voted no, precludes that from occurring. So just so for some of the newer members understand the process. Okay. The next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 135, Hanco Leadership Highway Designation. Representative Henderson, do you want to join us down there, please? So Representative Henderson, why don't you tell us about your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 135, Hanco Leadership Highway Designation, was a bill that I was inspired to bring based on my experience with the senator, but over the last 4 years serving with him on the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee. In fact, he was instrumental in helping me understand what the heck's going on here in our legislature in terms of the inner workings. But it wasn't just about me. It's not about me. I had many really interesting and personal conversations with a lot of folks across the state before I filed this bill. And I offered lots of members in the legislature opportunity to consider signing on or not. You can see this, the co-sponsors that are on here, and I do know that when I talked to the representatives in the county, I didn't talk to all of them because they were busy or I was busy, but I did talk to one in each county where this highway starts at Thermopolis, goes through that county north up through Cody, and then heads on up north to the Montana state line, State Highway 120. And I also talked to the senators who have jurisdiction in that area. And uniformly, they were all for it. Particularly the commissioners, and they had indicated they were interested in coming down to Cheyenne to testify. And I don't know if they're online. You know, things happen pretty quickly here in the Zoom age. But you know, we finished up our virtual session. It was on a Friday, and there's a very special ceremony the following day. And I know I wasn't able to go. I think there was a lot of folks that maybe wanted to go, couldn't go. The weather was kind of the wrong way. But I learned about kind of after the fact about the special ceremony that the folks in his community has set up for him via a Zoom link. And I thought about the two things that are very important in our state, not just in the legislature, but in our state. One of them is public service, and the other one's leadership. And so I thought it would be worth and had a merit to bring a bill
to have a discussion about designating this highway as a Hanco Leadership Highway. Before I go into some more detail on that, I'd like to share with you some of the things that fall into this, the piece of the aviation part of our state, and all the many things that Hank was instrumental in supporting in that area. If you follow this highway where it goes into Cody there, going up north, it goes by the Game and Fish, and it goes to the intersection with Highway 14. You take a left, and about a half a block down the road there on the right is the Cody Highway, and it's one of the two best, our Cody Airport, one of the two best airports in our state. So just quickly coming to a close here, Mr. Chairman, I just think that there's so much here that is meaningful. I think it's a worthwhile bill. You know, the senator was involved in a bill he brought a couple of years ago, 2018, for the Wild Horse Highway, which is that highway going, that 14 going east out of Cody and so on. So I talked with the people at WYDOT, and I asked to find out for sure if it had ever been designated before, and I was told it had not. And there was, you can see the fiscal note, there's 4 signs involved, brown and white, that'll be placed along the highway. And the costs will be from administrative costs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think the bill is pretty straightforward. I'd stand for questions.
Questions for Representative Stiver?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be a no vote on this. I think we are setting precedents here that we don't need to be setting. We had a sitting representative pass away. We have done nothing for him.
Representative, is there a question involved here?
So that's all I have to say at this point.
Questions for the bringer of the bill? Representative Obermuller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just pose that as a question. You know, I had a different mentor than you, and a fabulous leader. I mean, do we have enough highways for everybody who's been a great leader in the legislature? I know you've vetted that, so I wanted to give you a chance to address that issue.
Thank you.
Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yeah, the answer is yes. Yes to both questions, really. I mean, we as a body, you know, have the authority to decide when and if and what changes and how we want to designate highways in our state. And I don't think we take that responsibility lightly. But I'm one of 90. There's 89 other duly elected members of our legislature, and every one of them are more than qualified, have the expertise and the knowledge, the personal experience and whatnot to make their own decision as regarding what they want to bring in terms of legislation.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Henderson, I like the idea. You know, I see that the distinguished career of Senator Coe lasted longer than I've been alive on this earth. And I think that's something to be said. I also recognize some of the concerns from my counterparts here on the left. And I'm kind of curious on your stance if we were to maybe not dedicate this entire stretch of highway. You know, I looked at bringing a bill last year, and it was a very finite amount of space that we were looking at all law enforcement that we have lost. Yeah. Would it be okay with you to shorten the amount of space that we're dedicating as the highway? Maybe it's the stretch of highway that runs through the city of Cody. Would that be something that would be more amenable to you to potentially get this bill passed and make sure that, you know, you're getting the intention behind this bill?
Representative Henderson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. You know, that's a very good question, and it came up during the discussions, the conversations. The answer is, of course, I'd be open to that. I'm one vote, just like you. So let's have a fair and open discussion. You know, it's not, to me, it's not the quantity as much as it is the quality of the decision.
Any other questions for the representative? Okay, with that, I'll open public comment. Amanda, do we have anyone in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have anyone in the waiting room. YDOT is in the webinar currently.
Okay, all right. Amanda, if you could admit them, there is a question for YDOT, so.
Mr. Chairman, you should be seeing them on the screen.
All right, thank you, Amanda. And it's kind of the old adage of maybe don't go to a meeting you don't want to be in. So I see Mr. Gillette and Mr. Dehoff there, and I think Representative Brown has a question for at least one of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Either one of you can answer the question. I'm just kind of curious if you guys have, or if you can get me the mile markers for State Highway 120, and maybe provide like where the state highway begins and how far it goes through, so we could look at maybe amending this similar to what we did with the law enforcement Memorial Highway. Could you guys get that for me?
Mr. Gillette or Mr. Dehoff?
Mr. Chairman, Tom Dehoff with YDOT. Yes, we can provide you that information.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Gillette, Mr. Dehoff, why don't you just hold with us here for a little while? So public comment. Mr. Winnie, please come up. Just for the record, please identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. Speaking for myself, I started observing the education committees closely about 2010. And I have to admit that my first impression of Chairman Coe was basically an old line politician getting things done, turning the hand crank and so on. But as I observed him over the years and saw the things he did and how he did things, I came to understand how truly visionary a gentleman he was. I missed the opportunity to speak with his family because of the constrictions of COVID-19 at whatever the services they had. But I saw the two committees work hand in glove over those years. And, you know, my background includes a couple years teaching master's level nuclear engineering to commissioned officers. And so I had some idea of education. And I guess the best thing I could say is how you work out the details, where the mile markers are, those kind of things. Yeah, that needs to be done. But I kind of view this as like a sports team retiring a number. Rarely done. But he's the kind of gentleman where I would just say, I salute him. Subject to your questions, thank you very much. I do support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will close public comment then. Committee?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Brown, second. Oh, you'll seconded by Representative Stiver. Okay. Comments, question? Representative Stiver?
I just want to say I'm going to change my vote to get it out of committee. I like Representative Brown's proposed amendment.
Okay. Representative Brown?
Mr. Chairman, I would propose a contractual, my goodness, I'm still stuck on the last bill. Conceptual, there we go. That's the word. Words are hard today. Conceptual amendment. And I'll wait to get some direct information, but I will work with our secretary as well to make sure that this goes. But I am looking at designating basically a section of Highway 120, maybe 1 mile on either side of the city of Cody. And that would be the limits of the dedication of the state highway, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seconded by Baker. I'm sorry. Okay, so discussion on the amendment. So Representative Brown, just for our secretary's understanding, you will give her specific mile markers on which did it get, when will you, do you think you'll be able to get those for her?
Mr. Chairman, as soon as we end up here, I will call the engineer, Mr. Dehoff, and I will get that information from him, and I will refer that back to the secretary. So the amendment will be ready to go within 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Representative. So does everyone understand the amendment? Okay. All in favor? Aye, and raise your hand too. I find these screens just really disruptful.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I have, okay, opposed? So that's unanimous. Okay, any other amendments on the bill? And we're not working, this bill is a 2-page bill. I don't see 3-page, I'm sorry. I don't see a need to work this like we normally would on a much longer bill. Okay. Question being called. Diana, would you take the roll, please?
Okay. Representative Baker. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Burt.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Obermuller.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. Okay, Representative, you have your bill. Okay, thank you. Diana, any other work for us today?
No, sir.
Okay, Amanda, I think you can end the YouTube or video or whatever we call it now.